All right, Ashley. So, why is your voice your most powerful marketing tool?
So your voice is the one thing that no competitor can replicate. And it sounds cliche, but I think for a lot of businesses, when it comes to their content and digital presence, you find that they can strip out the very thing that makes people buy, and that's people. It's marketing 101, people buy from people, sales 101, right? And so it's that emotional connection and human behind the brand and your voice, your story, your perspective, your experience is your USP, your unique selling proposition, especially in saturated markets where seemingly everybody is selling the same thing. So that's why your voice is the most powerful marketing tool. I'm Ashley, marketing consultant and podcast host. I've spent the last 10 years leading campaign strategy and partnership activations across professional sports, startups, and nonprofits. And now I work with small business owners and leaders on marketing strategy and brand storytelling. And through the Endurance Diaries podcast, I've recorded more than 100 interviews with CEOs, professional athletes, Olympic champions, entrepreneurs, all unpacking their stories and learning firsthand the power of authentic voices to create connection, build trust, and move people to action.
I really like the people buy from people, not businesses. And that's, I think, what like you really emphasized right there because you'll buy from your friends or people that you get a testimonial from or a recommendation to over the person that has the best marketing or that's out on the billboards because you trusted the person that told you about them.
100%, and I think that's spot on because at the end of the day, it's like you can have 2 of the very same thing, and there could be small, product, or service differentiators between the 2, but at the end of the day, you're gonna go with that person that you trust, and how do you, build trust with somebody, right? Like, what does that look like? And I think it's just like anything, right? Like we're humans first. So think about just human interaction and what makes you trust somebody on like a people relationship level. Like that translates so much into business. And I think sometimes that can get lost. And so it's really coming back to those fundamentals. I think also too, right now in this in this age with everything evolving in technology and so many different options and of course with AI too, which is something we'll talk about, but it's like it can be very overwhelming for a person or like a small business or entrepreneur, when thinking about their marketing strategy. There's so many different options and things that you can get into or channels that you could be on, and it's overwhelming. And it's like, what does it look like when you just come back to the core of, what you do, but really who it is that you are, because that will speak through your business. And so I think, yeah, let's not take the people out of marketing. I think let's double down on it all the more.
And, that's a great segue into my next question for you. But before I get to that question, I want to ask more specifically. You say your voice is your most powerful marketing tool. Do you literally mean people's voices? Because you hear like Morgan and Morgan for the people. That's John Morgan's voice.
Yeah,
Like that's
yeah.
like. Do you actually mean people's voice, or what do you mean by that?
That's a great question, Reed. I think when it comes to your voice, it's like what it is that it's like it's those those kind of values, whether it is of yourself or your brand, but that allowing that to speak out, right? And so when you allow that to speak out, it's like using your voice, owning your voice in that. So it's really coming back to, yeah, knowing yourself and that values versus like what is the tone or what is the voice, right, of a brand in a business. Because yeah, great point. That can get a little confusing there too, especially when you are when you are watching commercials or something like this, or you see different voices behind a brand. I think the voice is really like owning who it is that you are, and that can't be replicated. And I'm speaking on like more of a smaller scale, right? Because a lot of the people that I'm working with are like working in small businesses, and that even within the community aspect, it's there's so much that's happening, right? And going back to people, people buying from people and connecting with people, I think all the more it's super important. So, um, that's a
Absolutely.
yeah, great call out there.
So then, how do you know if you've lost your voice in your content marketing?
I think a simple and actionable way to kind of check yourself in that, or kind of maybe even doing like an audit, right? If you were like saying, okay, hey, you're running your own business, you're running your own company, you're an entrepreneur, you want to pump out different content on different channels, but go back and look at your last, say, 5 to 10 pieces of content and really pose a question to yourself and ask, could anybody post this? Like, what is unique about what it is that I'm sharing in this piece of content? And I think when you ask that question, it may just reveal a gap to you or an opportunity that you didn't know was there. And what I've found just in interviewing different business owners, on my podcast or just in conversations, is that throughout that organic conversation, they'll often say, like, "Oh, I don't even know where that I didn't plan to share that. I didn't know where that came from." And that's usually because it's in these moments, like, it's those moments I think that resonate the most and can connect to most to it can really connect, to your audience or, whoever's on the other side, because it's that kind of, openness and dialogue that actually invites people in and creates, a real connection. And again, going back to connection and trust, and that's where that happens, that's the bridge in between the two. And so I think it's even just going back and checking, what are you sharing, and asking yourself, like, can this be duplicated? Or what is that unique thing that nobody else can, has that kind of unique perspective in a way, if that makes sense. So, um, yeah, I think that it's a way you can go back and kind of check yourself on it.
Yeah, I like that, and, like, sharing those, you know, vulnerability is a big buzzword right now, but it's those moments of where you're like, "Oh, like, I didn't really mean to share that," or maybe that was a little too far or something like that, like, that is really what starts to begin to build trust, with your potential clients, because they are actually getting to know you deeper than surface level. We can all get to know each other at a surface level, but building trust actually comes when you start to dig down. And
Mm.
y- so, why is podcasting such a powerful tool for building
Mhm.
trust before the sale?
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite questions and kind of like discussion points within this conversation as well, in marketing and podcasting, because just like any other podcasting is a tool, within your marketing kit, right? It's a tactic. And if somebody can listen to you on a podcast before making a decision, to understand your perspective, to establish that trust before the initial sales, like, but establishing that trust, that then the initial sales conversation starts from an entirely different place. And it also works in both ways as well. So if I'm about to start a sales conversation with somebody, and I notice that they've been featured on a podcast, then I'll go and listen first, and I will show up kind of knowing their perspective, referencing certain things that they've said. And that also changes the kind of whole dynamic of the conversation. So I think it works in favor of both parties in a way, because you have that opportunity to kind of get a feel for one another first, and then come in with a little bit more context than just kind of starting, from scratch in a way. So I think it gives an opportunity for both sides. Somebody who is kind of selling themselves, and then also wanting to, you know, um, be on the other side of, whatever kind of deal or whatever's coming out of that conversation. It just allows that space to kind of get to understand somebody first, and it can really influence and shape the conversation. And then it can close that loop a bit faster. That's something I want to also throw back to you as well and get your take on that too. Within your respective role and kind of lens that you have too on this.
hmm I think it's a great way for people to do research on each other and to start to figure out who that person is, especially in like we work with a lot of consultants or small business owners, and they are the brand, this they are the product. So it helps close that sale loop. Now you don't have to hop on 3 or 5 prospecting calls with this person beforehand. Like if they're able to listen to a podcast with you, or it works as well as a testimonial or recommendation, I think, from a trusted source, if they're able to sit there and listen to your perspectives ahead of time. And then I think that's also why advertisers have spent so much money getting into podcasting, because they know that if you sit and listen to a podcaster for multiple hours over the course of a year, like you're going to build trust with them. So then you're going to trust the products that they're promoting. In our case, that's usually the host is promoting themselves as the product, but we've seen that
Mhm,
with like AG1 and Whoop and Eight
mhm,
Sleep and all these health products that use health influencers or health
mhm.
influencers to sell these products because they know that their audience trusts them and that they can get immediate access to that trusted audience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. I mean, it's a huge there's so many possibilities within the world of podcasting. You're right. It's a smart I mean, it's why so many brands are getting behind and they're spending their ad dollars on podcasting space because they know that. Like and it requires something out of, the consumer to listen to long form content. And that's what podcasting often is, right? There's some channels and some podcasts that you're getting 5 to 10 minutes of something every day and that's just what it is. But typically the majority of podcasts that have these very large followings that, you hear a lot of different advertisers on, it's a long form like you're listening for 50 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours often as well, and that requires some level of trust between the consumer and, the host and the, guest that's coming on to have your attention for that long. And so I
Yeah,
think there's something very powerful in the medium of podcasting in just when you think about content through conversation and how much you can really, consume and take in that way. So yeah, it's
yeah.
powerful.
And think about, the last time somebody sent you a podcast to listen to, and you're like, "Hmm, am I really gonna invest my time doing this?" Or, so
Yeah.
it's to get over that hurdle of actually getting in their ears is one thing, and then holding them, you if you can achieve that level of trust with your audience, you've really built a strong relationship with them, for likely a long period of time until you were to lose that trust or your content fades away or something. So, yeah.
And that's a great point, and think about the ripple effect of that too, where it's like, you being my friend, if you send me a podcast, I mean, time is our most valuable asset, right? So it's like, it takes time to listen to this, but if you're recommending something for me, you think it would be interesting that I would, based on what you know about me and interest and all of that, I trust you. So, okay, I'm gonna give this a listen because you're the one recommending it to me, and so that also, I think when you think about trust in people, it goes back to that as well too, where it's like, if I just find, a piece of content on my own, I don't know, am I more likely to listen to it? But if I also know, hey, a friend of mine who I value their input, I value our conversations, etcetera, you recommend it to me, okay, I'm gonna listen. It works in I mean, that goes back to the top of the conversation too around trust with people.
Absolutely, and that
Um
but that's also where, like, the short form videos and the repurposing of the
Mhm,
podcast content can come in because you can help lower that barrier to entry of a long form podcast by repurposing the podcast episode into short form clips that hopefully are a
mhm,
lot of, like, punchy, valuable pieces of content that can um, like loop in potential listeners. And then once you
mhm,
provide them with enough value, then they'll be willing to listen to your podcast. That's where the trust continues to get built. You already built the trust to turn them into listeners. And then now you're going to continue to build that trust to turn them into clients and customers as well. And so that's why we always say that every podcast should not just be a podcast. It should be LinkedIn posts. It should be short form videos. It should be carousels on Instagram. It should be audio. It should be video. It should be on every single podcast platform. You spend too much time and effort on these podcasts for it just to be in one place.
yeah, it's a whole ecosystem, right? It's a whole strategic content ecosystem in the way that you can repurpose it, like you just mentioned, across all of these different channels. You can take a 30 to 60-minute conversation, and out of that, I mean, you can have content for days. And I think that that's something that should be really emphasized, for a business owner, somebody when they're thinking about podcasting, either to start themselves or even as it relates to, hey, maybe you want to pitch yourself on another channel to see all of these different use cases for that content beyond just the episode itself and where it is that it lives. So, like you just mentioned, I mean, in that raw material, like you have stories, you have insights, you have quotes, you have questions and perspectives that can all be repurposed across multiple channels for different marketing objectives. And there's so many possibilities in that. For you, Reed, you have produced hundreds of podcast episodes across different industries. What have you seen happen when a business owner consistently puts their voice out there versus when they don't?
Well, they spread a wide net and they're able to connect with a lot of people over the course of time, which they might not have otherwise been able to. You can go to a coffee meeting every single day. That's a lot of work. Or you can put a podcast out and hopefully and have, 10 or 15 people listen. That's almost as good. They get to know you. And then when they come meet you in person, they already have that connection with you. I think, you're also able to control your own narrative. If you're not controlling your own narrative, the public perception is controlling it for you. And I think what's the most powerful thing I've seen about this is when customers begin to repeat back your own language to them. Like I've made a couple LinkedIn posts recently about the power of video and building trust, and I had a potential client repeat those words back to me about how they
Mm.
wanted to get into video because it helped build trust with people that they haven't yet met. And I was like, perfect. This is awesome. We're speaking the same language now. So it really helps create that strong bond with those potential clients.
Mm. Yeah, that's so good. And two, like, let's go back to I know I kinda answered this question, but through podcasting, you mentioned that people listen to somebody before they ever get on a sales call with them. So how does that change from your perspective in the work that you are doing? How does that change the dynamic of the conversation whenever it does finally happen?
Yeah, there's no more cold calling if somebody's listened to your podcast. It's all warm interaction from there. You get to know your client gets to know you a little bit better, and now you can just begin asking questions about them. You guys have a beginning point where you can start from, and usually it's like, "Hey, I listened to your podcast episode with blank. I liked this," and then you can go from there. Um, your potential customer becomes familiar with how you think, your values, um, and they are more likely to trust you, which leads to an eventual purchase from you, likely, or referring you to other people. I know that I've referred people strictly based off their work, never having met them before. I'm like, I
Mm.
see that they do good work. You should look like you're interested in a service that they provide. You should go to them, and I've never met them before, but I've seen their work online.
Yeah, that's it's it's something that too, like, even when you think about people that you have never met in real life, but that you follow and listen to so closely, and you kinda take, it's like I would do business with X, Y, and Z who I've heard on certain podcasts because I understand their ethos, I understand kind of their ways of thinking and how they approach business or how they approach, these certain situations, and, like, that aligns with me, and so, like you're just saying, it's that kind of, that warm, like, it's almost as if you kinda already know them before you ever get into that next conversation,
Yeah.
and so you're just
They talk
starting from a different point.
the like big podcasters talk about this the parasocial relationship that gets formed with listeners when they're out in
Mhm.
public and people come up and talk to them like they know them, like they're friends, and the
Yeah. Yeah.
host is like, I don't know who you are. They did like Oprah was like the first really big person like this, where they would say like celebrities would go up to or people would go up to celebrities and say like, "Oh, I loved your work," but they would go up to Oprah and be like, "Come have dinner with my family." Like
Mm,
that's a different level of trust because they saw her every single day, being
yeah,
vulnerable and sharing her story. And we're both fans of Rich Roll, and I think he does a
yeah.
great. He like exudes what you just said. We know exactly what he's about, who he's about, and if he's recommending on certain topics, I'm gonna trust him and I'm gonna believe him. And then if I ever were to meet him in person, I'd have 1,000 things to talk to him about because I've listened to so many podcast episodes. So
Yeah, 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 exactly, but that's so funny is, like, constantly you're having this, like, view into their world every single day, and, like, you're just a total stranger to them. So I think yeah, but yeah, that's how it's that trust is built there. And then, yeah, going back to like why there's so much ad value in podcasting because of that. And that it converts like in the whole sphere of performance marketing. I mean, there's a huge shift, right, into podcasting and where to put those dollars because of that trust and that loyalty in a lot of ways. that you can connect with a certain podcast or a certain channel in the same way you would as like a pro athlete or like an influencer in the beauty space or whatever it may be. So,
Th-
yeah, there's
There's
a lot of power there.
there was a recent acquisition of a podcast called TBPN by OpenAI.
For
It's
sure.
basically like it's a 3-hour daily show about investments on YouTube. It's a podcast, it's a daily show on YouTube. They have like they say that their core audience is less than 300,000 people in the entire world, but it's the level of their audience is like CEOs and C-suite people and above only. Like so
Wow.
their ideal audience member is somebody that has 10 plus $1 million of ad spend. So
Mm,
they were acquired for 100 plus $1 million by OpenAI, and they only have like 40,000 subscribers on YouTube, and they only get like 1,000 views per live stream. But those 1,000 people
wow.
are so valuable to advertisers. They were selling like they had like $60 million worth of ads a year or something like that on a 3-hour show.
Wow.
Um, and so it's just crazy, like depending on who your audience is. I don't really know how that relates to what we were just
No,
talking
but
about,
that's
but
a no, that's
it's
yeah, I
crazy.
mean, it's an incredible example though, right, too, and I think that also goes into some of this conversation about what podcasting does for your brand and you in a way that goes kind of like when you think about the opportunities, right, and some of these kind of misconceptions, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that how is like if I create a podcast, right, is it worth it because I need to have so many views or so many downloads or, these kind of metrics that people can get caught up in. But actually there's so much value, that goes beyond the downloads, right? Yeah,
But if,
exactly.
speaking of that, what are some of those big misconceptions that business owners have about what it takes to make a podcast successful?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest, and obvious things, right, is downloads and who is this going to go out to and that kind of the impressions or the engagement in that way. There's so many amazing, podcast channels and productions out there that have whole teams behind them. And it's easy I think when you get started with anything, right, you want to kind of compare yourself. You want to be, I want to be like that channel. I want to be like this. I want to be like that. And then the moment that you start measuring your success against somebody else, like against somebody else's, metrics in that, you've lost sight of your own goals and what you're actually doing this for. And so I think the most important thing that you can do is just define what success actually looks like for you in this space. Is it visibility? Is it building trust with potential clients? Is it becoming a better communicator as a leader? Because podcasting can definitely help you do that. Is it creating content that will work for, that works for you long after it's, published, as we were talking about before, this whole content ecosystem. So I think there's just this like arbitrary like measure of success out here when it comes to getting into podcasting that like, oh, why even start because I'm not going to be like this person, or is anybody actually going to listen to this, or how many downloads will it be? But there's so I think that there eh, the ROI shows up in the intangibles as well too. And so that's also another thing too that I wanted to kind of speak on is that what podcasting can actually do for you and the person that is either like if you are hosting or you are, I would say, okay, more so from what podcasting would do for you as a person being interviewed. And that shows up in the intangibles. So that's things like confidence and clarity
Mhm.
that I have seen firsthand, others providing feedback to me as a host that they're saying, wow, like I've never like thought about my business in this way, and now I feel more comfortable in conversations, when I'm out at an event or something to actually speak on it like this because of this kind of like organic nature, right? In dialogue. And so um yeah, they're not people aren't prepared for certain specific questions, and so it's in those unscripted moments that they discover something about themselves, and so does the audience, and I believe
Mhm.
that there's a lot of value in that, so that was, like, 2 responses into 1 there, but yeah,
You're good.
that's it.
I want to go back a bit here, but you
Yeah,
said
yeah,
it brings up like comparison is the thief of joy. Like you can't look if you're going to start a podcast, you can't look at like Joe Rogan or something and be like, I want to be like, I'm going to compare myself to that. Like he's been doing it for like almost 20 years now. Like maybe
totally.
if you're 20 years in, then you can start doing that. Um,
Yep,
and then you said, what's the goal of the podcast? It's always literally the first question I ask anybody I'm consulting with or a potential client. I'm like, what are you trying to get out of this? What is the goal of this? If you had, and they're usually like, oh, I just want to share my knowledge. And I'm like, okay, great. So if you make $0 off of this, is this a success? And they're like, no, no, I want to make some money too. I'm like, okay, so for, are we looking for advertisers? Are we looking for building trust to sell your current products? Like, are we going for social media clicks or social media presence? Because we can start to design the actual episodes around your goal. Are you going for like hyper niche? Do you have a specific person you're trying to target with this? Or are you a very general like comedy podcast or something like that? But that's always the first question I ask because it's so important. You can go in so many different ways. And then, like you said, the ROI way past downloads and views. Like I believe we've talked about this before as well, but you know, people look at podcast numbers and you see like, oh, I got 100 listeners on this podcast. And you're like, well, fill a room up with 100 people and talk for 20 minutes. And does that feel good? You're like, yeah,
yeah,
that feels good. So
yeah,
like, that's how we need to be thinking about this. It's not just 100 people clicked and scrolled past something. You can see metrics like how long did they listen for?
mm,
How many people listened? And that's a big deal at the end of the day. The first people in society that have been able to achieve that level of scale um, through this medium that is relatively easy to produce consistently at scale.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, and can we just get into that too, just as a segue? I mean, I don't know if this was
Hmm.
on here too, but like, I mean, with the, the clients that you're working with and the work that you're doing, I mean, I've learned so much just as a podcast host, right, of different techniques and ways that you can get started, and so that I think maybe is another barrier to
Yeah,
entry in this way because you may think, "Oh, I need all of this equipment or I need to do all of this or I need to like it's so overwhelming." And you help ease that because you can produce the podcast as well, but just speak a little bit to, how easy is it to actually get started with a podcast?
yeah. I think like getting started is the hardest part, and then staying consistent after that is hard. But you can. I'm happy to always answer questions about this, but I recommend people. So sit down. You can sit down with a voice memo on your. If you have an iPhone, there's a voice memos app. Sit down, like make an outline about what you want to talk about. That can be your very first podcast episode. Just hit the record button, see if you can talk structured for however long you want to talk for, and then you can listen back to it and go from there. If that's something that you like doing, then I recommend we take the next steps and start talking about video. There's great platforms that make it super easy, like Riverside, which we're on right now, to record super high quality video. You can fix up the audio with no problem. You can interview people from anywhere in the world. It's like if I didn't have Riverside, I don't know if I would be doing this because they make it so easy. And I will forever say good things about Riverside. But
Yeah.
even though not sponsored by Riverside, but that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, for sure. It's something and I think that's too where it's like the example you just shared about getting out, a note taker or something even on your phone and recording, just try it, that doesn't have to go anywhere, but I think just putting yourself stretching yourself where you're like, "Okay, don't allow the podcast art, the names, the titles, the episode needs to be X, Y, and Z." You'll never get started. Like, it just will
yeah.
hold you back forever, right? So it's like,
Mhm.
just hit record and going back to your point about, like, what are your goals, right? Strip it down, like, what are your is it just to, have another channel to share your knowledge on something or your point of view or perspective? Doesn't matter if you get clients from this. Ultimately, everybody would want all of the above, right? But really niching that down, what is your goal, is so important, it's so fundamental, and I think it's actually
Mhm.
something that can be, like, very overlooked as well too, because it sounds
Yeah.
like that's so basic. Obviously, I know what my goal is in this, but it's like, do you really?
Yeah. Well,
You know?
I love, like, your story for how you started the Endurance Diaries podcast. You're like, "Can I do something without the expectation of performance?" And then now it's kind of turned into something more. There's over 100 episodes now. Now you're doing Endurance Diaries media. So it's like you never know what's actually going to come from it, which is another thing I think that people they think, "Oh, I'm going to get ad money. I'm going to get sponsors." And I'm like, "Slow down. Like I hope you do. I hope you do, but, like, let's work on building your personal brand, or work on building trust with your potential clients. Let's work on creating a consistent posting schedule and structure, and all of that has to come before you get sponsors in reality, unless you yeah, in reality, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, the other thing too, right, is that advertisers, they look at certain, like the whole clicks per milli or whatever it is, right? Where it's like sometimes you have to show that. So you have to kind of build the audience first before you can. There's certain things that can have to happen before you get from, so you don't just get from step A to step, H, right? You got to
Mhm,
do the other steps in between. And
mhm.
so I think that's something too to consider, right? Like,
Yeah, or so and, as Ashley was talking about the views per mil or milli,
mm,
a millionaire. I'm a
yeah,
young money millionaire
okay, that has
is
to
what
go
came into my head.
somewhere. That has to go somewhere. I don't know if we're gonna do bloopers or whatever, but that needs to live somewhere.
But
Um,
most advertisers pay, and YouTube does the same thing. You get paid like cost per mil, so they'll pay you X dollars or cents per thousand people that you reach with your podcast, downloads or listeners or whatever that metric is. So it's um, most people are making money from sponsors. Like your ad revenue is not really gonna it might like it might put a little bit in the bank, but like for the most part, it's going to be the sponsors that really push any the sponsors and the selling of your own products is really going to push you into the profitability range, I would say.
mm,
Um, but if you want to, actually, we can start talking about like what it means to be a guest on a podcast as well.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you are someone who gets pitched a lot of guests for your podcast. So if someone wants to get booked on a podcast, what are some of those do's and don'ts of pitching yourself?
I love this question. Ironically, it is the hyper personalization messages that lose me. So I think AI has made it so easy to, make a pitch being super personal. And I am the recipient of a lot of emails. I know that I'm not the only one. I know that Endurance Diaries is very special, of course, to me, but I know that I'm not the only podcast that's getting pitched in this way. But whenever you are dropping in guest names or mentioning certain theme of, an episode, it starts to sound very generic. And when every kind of email sounds like that, it actually signals that you never actually listened in the first place. And I can feel the difference between that, between somebody who genuinely connected with the content that's being shared and somebody who, is just trying to get their guests booked on any and every podcast. And here's the thing, as somebody who has worked in marketing for, 10 plus years in that way, sometimes when I receive these messages, I'm like, the client who hires these agencies to send out these messages, I'm like, "My channel is not," and I do a little bit of research, and I'm like, "Endurance Diaries is not the place for your," like, and it's no knock on my it's no knock on my channel, but I'm like, that's why I'm like, "Look, I can actually come alongside you and help you in a more strategic way because you have your teams sending email messages to me about coming onto my podcast to promote your stuff, and if there was a little bit of more intentionality and research behind it, you would actually realize that Endurance Diaries isn't the spot for you to, start promoting. Start like it's just not. So I'm like, you don't know what I'm about here. You need a
Hmm.
new marketing team. Okay, let's talk.
Yeah,
That's my
yeah,
that's my pitch right there because it's like, and that's what also like stirred up a lot in me and like seeing the opportunities of like, okay, I can actually do this more intentionally and work with clients in an intentional way because their own teams, they're hiring people to outreach and send cold emails that I'm the recipient of.
hmm,
I'm like, you need
yeah.
I'm not your right channel.
Yeah.
Does that
It's
make
like they're doing
sense?
this wide, like, they're throwing out, like, a super wide net when in reality, they need to get very specific, like, if you're going like, do the littlest bit of research. Like, I always get emails from people that are like, "Hey, does your parking lot need repaving? And I'm like, if you just looked on Google, you would see that there's not a parking lot here. There's
Yeah,
no repaving. Like, just do a
exactly,
second of work.
exactly,
So,
and that's the
yeah,
thing where it's like, it's a big turn off to me, and it's a big red flag and just a signal to me that, no, you're not actually, like, I
yeah,
no,
yeah.
I don't pay attention to it. I delete the messages and I try to block the person from emailing me again because I know I'm on, like, a cadence bump, but
Mm,
it doesn't work.
mhm,
Like,
yeah,
and I think more and more and more people can, like, read like, kinda cut through that noise, right? And they
mhm,
want to have, like, what's actually real. Like, I think personalization is huge in sales, like, it's huge. Just do a little bit of research and tell me a little bit, make this a little bit more about me than about you in the sense, right? And that's it's like in
yeah, yeah,
sales and that, it's like, this is all about you. This isn't about me.
yeah,
But whenever you come in hot, like saying these things that
yeah,
just make a disconnection, I'm like, okay, well, you lost me there.
yeah. So, who's somebody that sent you a cold email that has gotten through to you, that you did like?
That is a great question. I will have to say, Oleg Lukid, who was featured on Endurance Diaries, he represents a few clients. He helps them like with PR and that kind of stuff as well. And he had sent me a message, and it was very personable, but it wasn't over the. It wasn't like that you could tell right away. It was like brackets podcast name, brackets theme, brackets
Mhm,
whatever. He just sent a note and it was very kind and it was very approachable. And it was like, hey, I work with certain clients. I know that you share stories of, overcoming challenges and perseverance. Here's just a very short, note on each of these clients. If any or like all of them would be of interest for you to interview because of the nature of, your channel being about these stories and sharing them, let me know. And I was like, huh, I really appreciate that because it gave me a little bit of insight on each guest, potential guest. And then I responded back and I was like, huh, that's really interesting. And then I also, I connected with Oleg and I was like, wait a second, you have an amazing story. I want you to come onto the podcast. And yeah, we haven't met in person, but he's such a awesome, like we've chatted a few times and just that you can feel that authentic connection with somebody. And to
yeah.
me, I'm like, okay, that rules over when I get an email message that's like this long. And then if you're on a bump that's like, hey,
Yeah,
Ashley, just following up if you missed my last message.
right.
I'm like, "No, didn't miss it, I just deleted it."
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so I think that brings up, like, a great point about, like, people who are hiring these companies to get you on podcasts. Like,
Yeah.
if I would ask for, like, proof of some of their work because you can tell, like, they literally just they bought, like, a subscription to the top X number of podcasts in this specific avenue, and then they've gone
Mhm.
through, like, in the past month and seen what podcast you posted. They pick one, they upload the transcript to ChatGPT or whatever and say, "Write me an email that is gonna reach out to this person so I can be a guest," and it's super like, it's so obvious that this person put
Yeah.
no thought into the reach out, when it's like
Yeah.
they could just LinkedIn DM you and probably get a better chance at this, you know?
Yes, and that's what I would say too, even for others that I've been connected to, it's like someone just, drop a note in LinkedIn and I feel more of that connection, but to your point, Reed, it's like, this is just becoming so I mean, I'm seeing gaps and opportunities in it as somebody on the
Mhm,
marketing side because I'm like, "Okay, you're paying somebody to do this, and it's no effort." Like and I'm not saying that to be rude, but it's like, it's easy now with the tools that we have access to, like, go in and be like, "Yeah, create a outreach message to this person." It's like, and sales is a numbers game, right? It's like in anything.
yeah,
I've worked on sales teams where I've sent, cold email outreach and they're on a cadence and they work for certain things, 100%, it does. But now all the more you really gotta stand out with it because everybody's doing it. So that
mhm,
goes back to, like, what makes you different, you know?
yeah,
And you
yeah.
don't need to send a long message like this to get somebody's attention. You're gonna get it sent in their trash.
Yeah, yeah,
You
and
know?
the all the emails we have coming in, like, every day, it's like, if I have to spend more than 30 seconds or if I can't figure out what this email is about, like, I'm just gonna hit delete, like but it
Yeah.
also makes me think of these potential these people who are hiring these agencies to reach out, like, they are spending money on podcasting in a different way. Like, there's the 2 avenues, right? You can choose to go on as a guest for podcasts, or you
Mhm.
can start your own podcast, right? And you're gonna spend money either way. They're spending money to do it that way. They're trying to build their authority, credibility, and trust by going on other people's podcasts and sharing their story and then their product. Because there's always, like, that's the trade-off with podcasts. Like, I'm getting a guest, and I understand that it's because they're trying to sell something. Like, it's a content, there's a trade-off. I have to do, like, I don't have to come up with a whole entire episode by myself. I can interview somebody. It's a trade-off. That's part of the decision. But, like, so they're spending money in that area.
Mm.
So there's clearly value in it in podcasting. If people are, like, spending money to have some company AI cold outreach to 1,000 podcasts, and then they get on there and give their spiel. But I think I also want to ask you about these guests, and if you've had any experience with it, like, actually saying yes to some of those cold
Mhm.
outreaches,
Mm.
and you can tell the person has been on 150 podcasts this week. They are
Mhm.
like, they're either tired of sharing their story, or this is just another podcast episode to them. So, like, have you had any experiences with that? And what would you say are some good guest practices for if people do end up getting on a podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question because, going back to podcasting being a great way to promote, like, whatever it is, whether it's your business or if you wrote a book or something like that, and you see that if you look up somebody's name and they've been featured on, like, 15 other podcasts, great, but also, are you telling the same story on every podcast as well? Because then what makes a difference? You already told this story here, you told that story it's the same theme just on different channels, and so I think in that, for me as a host, if I see that somebody has been on all these different other podcasts, I don't want it to sound the same because then it's like, this is already out there. So
Hmm.
that's where the challenge for me becomes like, what's a different angle? And so my recommendation to somebody who is like pitching themselves or wanting to be booked on different, or hey, they've been on this podcast, now they're going to go on that one and that one, is even within yourself is trying to take a different angle of how it is you're telling the story. So what is it that you can share on Endurance Diaries that is a bit different than what you share on this other podcast over here? And because then it allows the audience or different, whoever may be interested in you or your business or whatever to learn different parts about you. They're not just hearing the same thing over and over again.
And
Um,
it makes me sorry, it makes me think of, like, I forget who it was. There was an author who was releasing a book, and they went on Tim Ferriss, Rich Roll, and Andrew Huberman podcast. And I listened to the Rich Roll one because, like, I think they also negotiate, like, who gets to release it first, because Tim always is the first one to release it. Um,
uh-huh.
but and then it's like I listen to one and I listen to the first 5 minutes of somebody else's, and I'm like, oh, this is, like, literally the exact same. Like, the guest is sharing the same stories about the book. It's just a different host. Like, this is just
Mhm.
recycled content at this point. Um,
Yeah.
there's nothing unique about that.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And that's the thing where I think it is like, of course, each channel has its own respective audiences. However, if you search a name, like, you're gonna be able to find them featured on this podcast, this podcast, this podcast, this podcast. So to your point there, if you already listened to this guest on Tim Ferriss, then it's the same thing than if they're on another channel and they're on another channel and you're like, okay, well, it seems like, yeah, it's just all recycled. So I think that's also something to kind of be like aware of as well in the effort that there is some strategy with it too. It's not just about how many podcasts you can get booked on because that can kind of dilute
Absolutely.
your way your like brand and your message in a way because it's like are you just, like, on your own little podcast tour? Where I
Yeah.
think it goes back to this, like, exclusivity, right? Like, "Oh, so and so only gives maybe 1 interview a year, and it's on this channel," or, like, whatever, that there's something to that too. So I think there's kind of that, like, song and dance with it as well, is, like, it's great to get booked, but how much, and what are you sharing so that you don't dilute your own message? So you have seen a lot of podcast recordings. What are some of the small things that people do, especially as guests, that instantly make them stand out in a good way?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, like, bring the juice, like, that's what I always say, like, bring some energy. You know how it is to be in a conversation with somebody in person and they're just not happy to be there, like, you don't have to be a guest on this podcast, you could say no, you can reschedule for a time that you're in a better mood, but, like, bring the juice, be happy about being there, and be willing to share your expertise, like, willingly. Like, people who are closed off, you just want to give a sprinkle here or a sprinkle there, like that doesn't do great for a long form podcast interview. Like you need to give without the expectation of return. Like, and that's
Mm,
what's going to make you a valuable guest. And then, of course, prepare. Some people like to not know the questions and they like to answer on the fly. And I've seen those people and they still don't do as good of a job as the ones who even just read the questions beforehand. I'm not saying sit down for 30 minutes and take notes, but and I'm also not saying over prepare because I've had people like that too who write down exactly what they want to say for each question. That's just as bad as not preparing at all. So there's a nice middle ground in here of read the questions, maybe rehearse the main talking points that you want to make for those questions, and then off the top of your head come up with additional things or whatever the vibe or the feeling of that interview is, adjust. But definitely like number one, bring the juice. Like you can be saying absolute nonsense, but if you're having a good time and bringing good energy, it's going to be way better than somebody who is talking in a very boring way, getting great information, I think at least.
yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, that's the thing too. I think we've talked about this before where it's like that tone of delivery. I mean, you called it out in the beginning whenever I was sharing my thing, but it's like sometimes we like I know for me as a consumer of content, I'm like, I like the voice, I like the way that somebody speaks about something that I will listen to them because I appreciate their delivery more so than like, hey, someone's gonna educate me on X, Y, and Z, but it sounds like, they're just super monotone and here we
Yeah.
are. It's like, you're
Yeah.
losing me.
Yeah, we've all
So,
been to events like more breakfasts where there's been a
yeah.
speaker that's been hired and they get up there and they're an economist or something and they're just spouting the facts and you're like,
Mhm.
all right, I'm just going to eat my food then.
You're
Like I'd
not
rather be
listening.
talking to the people at my table, you know? If you're
Exactly.
not going to say it in a way that's entertaining, like why say it at all? You're not going to get anybody.
Exactly, exactly. It's a great point. So, there's also a question that people may be asking themselves, they may be sitting with right now, whether or not they should start their own podcast or just try to pitch themselves or have, somebody like Ashley, no kidding, having somebody else pitch on their behalf and reaching out to, you know, get booked on other shows. So when somebody's deciding between whether or not to start their own podcast or just be a guest on other shows, how should they think through that decision?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, understand that to start your own show, it is going to take some effort, especially up front. And then you should commit to being consistent with that. Also, have like an end goal in mind if you are thinking about starting your own show. Are you going to? I ask people all the time, how many episodes is your podcast going to be? And they're like, I don't know. Like, I'm like, oh, so you're just going to do it until the day that you die? Like, maybe in a best case scenario, that's great. But have like an end goal in mind, what it is you want to achieve, and then as you start to think about those goals, decide, does it make sense just to go on other people? Can I go on other people's podcasts and achieve those goals, or can I only achieve those goals from starting my own? Some great aspects of starting your own podcast. You own that audience. You're building your own personal brand. Um, you have the emails from people that sign up for your newsletter. There's ways to incorporate all this content, and your social media platforms can use all the content that you create from the podcast. If you're going on other people's, hopefully they provide you with that content. You can ask them for that. I would hope that they share that with you. But ultimately, it's their audience. They own those people, that audience, and you're just stepping in for one episode. Now you can, as we've talked about, you can spread your net really wide in that way and hit multiple audiences. But just begin to think about that aspect of it because, maybe you're just releasing a book. It might not make sense to start a whole podcast for a book release and maybe just makes sense to go out and be a guest, but maybe you're starting a consulting practice and you know that you're going to be doing this for 10 years. Well, then it might make sense to start a podcast now and start to build that authority, credibility, and trust with people so you can continue to build that practice out throughout the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just as you describe it, it just comes back to the goals, right? Like, in your current context and position in which you're in. And so evaluating that, looking at that, and then deciding, okay, well, what is the best way to handle what? And I think that's where both of our lines of work overlap in a way, right? Because it's like, hey, you are able to, and I think that's the thing too, where it's like, um, coming back to somebody who wants to start their own podcast, you know, what do so let's transition into this question then. For somebody who is thinking about starting their own podcast, what is it that they need to be honest with themselves about before they begin?
Yeah, I mean, what your ultimate goal is, if it's to make money, that's great, just be honest with that. And how is that going to happen? Are you
Mhm.
willing to show up for your audience consistently is another thing. Because just like great quality podcasts can build trust, bad quality can ruin it. So
Mhm.
there's levers here. You need to make sure that you put out a good enough quality product to where you're not going to ruin your reputation, and then understand that it is a lot of effort. But it can be worth it if it's executed properly.
Yeah, 100%.
So I always say that the service that I offer is that my client shows up to the microphone and I make sure everything else happens. So you show up with the content and all we have to do is hit record and then I take over everything else from there. So from the recording and editing process, if you need idea generation, we can work through that as well. But essentially, if you don't want to worry about the editing, you don't want to worry about the production, fading the music in and out and exporting the gigs of files and things like that, then we can work together. And you just show up to the microphone and talk. Um, and then I'll make sure it gets out to YouTube and Spotify and Apple and all of those platforms. So I try to make it as easy as possible because most people don't want to do all the editing. Like they want to talk into the
Yeah.
microphone. They want to interview people. They want to talk to guests. They don't want to do everything else. So I'll take that from you. You come up with the content and I'll do everything else.
Yeah, I can attest to that as a podcast host. The thing is, I actually enjoy that other aspect of it, but I will say, if I didn't enjoy it, I would be tossing everything over to Reed and to allow him to kind of take it from there because here's the thing too, and it's a huge time suck, right, for people. And that's where I've had that like, "Oh my gosh, how do I do this? How do I focus on my full-time job? Do people even know this takes time? Do people know that I'm doing this by myself?" Like, and I like want to get that out there and it's like no one cares, like you're choosing into it. So I would just say that like it's a huge, it is a time consuming to do all of that. So if you just show up and allow somebody like yourself free to just handle everything from there, I mean, that's a huge, like, weight off of somebody who wants to get into the space.
And I would say like you can like podcasting is a super um, a like low barrier to entry form of media, but it's going to take you probably 50 hours to learn how to produce a podcast. So, and the first 25 podcasts that you produce are going to be super slow and you're going to slog through it until you finally figure out your process. Now, I have a way that I work with my clients already to where we can make things as efficient as possible. So, you can learn the editing softwares. You can learn how to upload to a hosting site and what that is and all that stuff. Or we can just have a conversation. I can tell you how to do that. So, yeah.
Mm. I would say have the conversation.
And I'm always happy to share anything. You can check out my LinkedIn too, because I got lots of good information on
Yeah.
there. But
Yeah, and I can say too, I mean, again, as somebody who's in this space, right? As somebody who hosts a podcast and that, there's so much that I learn from you, what you share, just easy, easy tips and kind of getting in there and getting started in a way that's very approachable and not intimidating, right? Because
yeah,
it can be something that you're like, "Oh, is this just another thing that I have to do?" And it's like, you don't have to do it, but this actually could be a good a good option for you or a possibility that you can kind of weave into your overall, marketing strategy and plan depending on what your goals are. It all comes back to the goals and the intent
yeah,
and purpose.
yeah.
Especially when you think like for longevity and sustainability over time.
Absolutely, and do I have 2 more things before I ask you a question, Ashley, but the first thing is,
Yeah.
what also is great about working with someone who's done it before is those little things that you don't think about, like, all of my clients, the first 10 episodes, they're like, "I hate listening to my voice," and you're like, "Yeah,
Mm.
we all do, we all hate it," but you have to do it until you get used to it, and then it does become something that you are comfortable with. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel like it'll ever be like that at the beginning. You're like, "I hate the sound of my voice," but eventually you get used to it, and you might come to like it. And then also, like 2025 was the first year that over 50% of Americans listened to at least one podcast in a month. So podcasting, I know it feels like it's been around for a really long time. Everyone has a podcast and there's millions of podcasts, and that's true, but it just became mainstream in the sense that like a majority of Americans listen to a single podcast episode in a single month. So there's so much more ground to cover worldwide across the country. Like it's not, we're not even at what podcast is going to be in 10 years.
Yeah.
But with all of that being said, Ashley, does somebody actually need a podcast? Do you actually need a podcast?
The short answer is no. What every business does need is a consistent way to build trust, and podcasting is a very powerful way to do that. I would ask the question, do you need a long form trust building content channel? And if your sales cycle is long and you're selling that kind of, expertise, if it's very relationship driven, etc., then yes, podcasting makes enormous strategic sense in that way. It really just depends on your business and your goals, and that's something that, we keep coming back to, throughout this whole conversation is your goals, right? So it's like if someone says, "Okay, do I need to do this? Do I need to be on that channel? Do I need to be on this channel? Do I need" It's like this is a way podcasting is a very powerful way to build trust over time. And
Mhm,
look at, your business, your brand. I mean, we all need to build trust, right? So it's like the short answer is no, but underneath that, it's like if you're trying to build trust, then hey, you can in you it's within the capacity in a way, or hey, you can, you know, um hire somebody to take that heavy lifting off that podcasting can be.
mhm.
It's a great it can make a lot of sense in that way. But
And I think it really makes sense for the people that are selling expensive products. Like if you're selling like a 10 plus $1,000 product, like your consulting services or something like that, and you're like, I can go network for 40 plus hours a week and never make a sale, or
Mhm.
I can talk to 100 people and I'm going to get one of those people, then podcasting is probably amazing for you because you can build that trust beforehand. And I think it's also great if you're like maybe if you're selling like trinkets or something like that, sponsoring a podcast would be a great way to go about it
Yeah.
because you do get access to a wide range. Like AG1 is like the biggest podcast sponsor in the world, and it's like a $29 product, but they're spending millions and millions of dollars on advertising because it works. So
Oh,
I think
yeah.
it can be valuable at both ends of the spectrum, but like
Mhm.
how is it valuable for your product that you're trying to sell?
Yeah, 100%. It's asking those questions. I mean, at the end of the day, again, it's like, it's asking the questions, is really understanding, what your goals are. And I think also, having conversations as well with others who are in the space, right? And who understand and can help you to kind of unpack some of that too, right? So that's where
Hmm.
I think like I can come in to help. No, but it's
Yeah.
like, it's like let's break it down and understand and being able to see all sides. And then also knowing the heavy lift that it can be, and if you don't wanna deal with if you don't have the kind of bandwidth in a sense to, like, handle everything from and most of the time these business owners, they don't, right? These organizations, they
Hmm.
don't have that bandwidth, but it's like there's people that do, that work and do this and, can be a great partner, um, to help you achieve that, so,
Yeah, and
uh
Ashley, I cannot believe that we've gotten 66 minutes into this recording before we've touched on this topic, but can't I just use AI for this? Like, why are you talking to me about this? Can't I just ask ChatGPT to do this for me?
Uh, well, I'll say this. I'll say the business leaders who win are the ones who use AI as a partner and not a ghostwriter for their identity. I think it's so important to not allow to not let AI become your brand voice, going to the top of the conversation of your brand or your voice being your most powerful marketing tool, right? Is the same thing. And I think with AI just, commoditizing content and services, it's your unique voice that becomes a differentiator that you need to actually stand out. And I believe that the more AI generated content that like floods our feeds in a ways, the more a real human voice becomes your competitive advantage. And that's something that I'm doubling down on. I think AI is great. It can repurpose, it can repurpose your words into notes and clips and captions and all these things, but it cannot create the specific way that you phrase something, your specific perspective, your specific voice in something. And so yeah, when you're
Mhm.
I think that's that's it. That's
Yeah.
it. I think,
I
yeah, I'll stop there. Maybe it's not the best, like, wrapped up answer, but I think it's just not allowing it to become your voice.
yeah. And I mean, you can only feed it so much, but you have original thoughts. Like the LLM is only going to be able to know what you tell it. But and I think that as we go, like there probably already are, and there will be straight AI generated podcasts, which
Mm,
I agree, doubling down on like real, authentic conversations and real people interacting with each other will be extremely more valuable. Will be
yeah,
way more valuable in the long term. Um,
totally.
yeah, yeah. So,
Where do
Ash,
I was
go
just
ahead.
gonna
Sorry.
say, I was gonna ask you just some follow-up questions on that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, where do you see people relying too much on AI when it comes to content like this?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it's a writing posts, like
Mm,
whatever that may be. LinkedIn posts. We're both on LinkedIn a lot, so
mm,
writing posts without feeding it their own voice, or starting from like if you just were to say, "Hey, write me a post about this subject," like don't do that. What I
yeah,
like to do is I like to talk out what my thought is and what my idea is for the post and how I want it to be structured, and then have it generate like an actual like thought, because I'm very scatterbrained. So having it like organize my thoughts, and then we'll go from there, like where I actually have something physical that I can see other than what's in my head. But if you're writing posts, I think we all know what that looks like, what an AI generated post looks like. So I mean that's by far
mhm.
the where people are relying on it way too much.
Yeah, I mean, you were just mentioning, too, just, like, your own voice and kind of putting that in. So if somebody is using AI the right way in their content process, what does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, I think it's idea generation, research, use that as a thought partner or an expert. Um, don't take what it says as fact necessarily, or like don't just copy paste it and post it out into the universe. Like chat with it a little bit, or work back and forth with it. Use it as a partner, right? Like as if you got someone else at your desk with you, and you guys are both um, like volleying ideas off of each other, and like till you get to a final product. I would say,
Mhm.
and you can use it for grammar checks and spell checks and things like that, obviously. But I don't think that you should use it strictly for like, hey, write me a post about this subject. Like you got to give it a little bit more than that. You got to work with it a
Yeah.
little bit more.
Yeah, totally, totally. I mean, I think even in that too, you can almost get lost in your own thought process of, like, I mean, it's a real thing about, like, these studies about our critical thinking abilities in AI and, like, you
Oh yeah,
know?
yeah.
Because if we're just starting from this instead of like, "Okay, let me" it's
Like, I can
kinda
already tell it's happening to me. Yeah, I can
yeah,
already
but I mean,
tell.
it's true though, right? So it's like, what can
Yeah.
we do in ways and I think something that I practice in that too is just, like, journaling about whatever it
Mm,
may be. So if it's like I have a topic or something or, like, I kinda wanna go and take a specific angle or something that I'm gonna share soon on just this topic of, like, the inner critic and I kinda did this poll on this, so I recorded a solo pod on it today, actually. And I'm thinking like, wow, now that from the beginning of our conversation, Reed, when you told me about my tone, I was like, the way that I started this is a little depressing when I start talking about the inner critic. So, but it's kind of a depressing topic, right?
yeah.
So anyway, but the point of that is like, even with that, it's like all of that though, it's like, let me just write this out, what it is that I want to kinda what I wanna say, you
Mhm.
know? And even that, it's hard for me to just pump that in because anytime if I try to be like, "Hey, create me like what would be a 15-minute it's not me."
Oh,
And
yeah,
I'm just like,
yeah.
"This isn't me, this sucks." And then I feel like I'm spending more time trying to create it to be like, "No, you don't get me.
Yeah, yeah,
This isn't right." I'm not gonna, like, pause like this, or it's like, and then this, pause, and
yeah.
then this. It's so structured, like, the same way, and I'm like, "This is not how I speak. This is not how
Mhm.
I write." But the ideation, right, and those some of those other things that you were touching on, it's so helpful, right?
Mhm.
The research, using it as a thought partner, all of these things, but, like, don't allow it to take, to take over, who it is that you are, right? And I think it's like it can be a paradox in a way because using AI in an effect, right? We're doing that to like be more personal, but the more that we do that, it can actually like it's like less personal. Like the
Wow.
more we like, yeah, I don't know how to say that, but it becomes less.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. So
I was gonna
anyway,
like, and as we talk about this, I'm thinking about it more, and I agree, like, I've sat here and talked to chat for like 15 minutes about something that I want to post, like a LinkedIn post, let's say, and it'll write it, and I'll be like, "That doesn't sound like me. I wouldn't say this, that. I'm literally talking to you right now. This is how I want it to sound," you know? And it took I could have just written the dang thing in the amount of time that it took me to get it to actually sound like me. Now, where I have used it in a way that I was like very happy with it was, in a recent video shoot I did, I needed to come up with questions, I needed
mm,
voiceover, I needed, like, multiple aspects of for this video, so I was able to tell it, like, my general outline of what I wanted, and then I'm going and asking these questions. So I reviewed the questions that I wanted and the voiceovers that I needed the person, but then, like, they ultimately spoke their own voice and then used the voiceover, like, how they wanted to say the thing. So, you know, it wasn't taking over somebody's voice, it was prompting somebody else to give their thoughts, and I thought that made the whole video shoot, edit, everything so much faster.
yeah, no, 100%. That's definitely it's a different use case in that way for sure. Um, and yeah, I mean, that's great stuff because it's like it's so helpful and is not going away, right? But it's like, are we utilizing this in the best way? And is it a best representation of actually of like who it is that you are? If you're going to use it as like a content writer in that sense, it's like, where's the originality in that?
Mhm,
And in the same thing where there's like certain services and products that can be in like oversaturated markets, it's like all of this, like, thought leadership is also, like, oversaturating it sometimes, right? It's like there's so much noise everywhere of, like, everyone wants to put their 2 cents in with this and this and this and this and this, and it's like, what is standing out? Because then it all looks like everyone's just prompting,
mhm,
you know?
and
So
if I wanna throw this in here as well, it's not really on topic, but
mm,
I've gone to probably 3 breakfasts or lunches or whatever recently and where they've had speakers, and I know that they use ChatGPT to edit their speech because they're like, "Protecting children matters," or like, "Blank, blank matters," and I'm
yeah,
like, "The all 3 of you who have spoken today have said blank, blank matters. I know you use Chat," like, it just like, please just review the thing before you go up and speak in front of people and, like, make sure it
and
sounds like you, please.
and here's why. It's like,
Yeah, exactly,
"This
and yeah.
matters, and here's why." It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
okay, come on, we can do better than that. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
there's so much that this is the opportunity, I think, is, like, there's so much actually that's, like, within each of us that is so unique and so different and, like, worthy of being shared and worthy of, there's so much value in it that it's like, I want more of that and less of just,
mhm,
like, curated stuff, right? And it's overwhelming, and I think, it's we can even get in our heads about it, and then it's like, "Okay, well, let me just ask, let me just prompt this in here and just see what's best," and it's like, we're spending so much effort. I think it'd be interesting too is like, hey, instead of asking chat, like, what to write on this, be like, "Hey, what are some ways that can help me think through this? Because I'm getting so frustrated by you because you're not capturing my voice in this. This
mhm,
isn't how I would want to say it." So instead of engaging back like that and saying like, "No, you didn't get it right," or like, "Yeah, I don't sound like this. That sounds too cliche. It's too cliche."
Yeah.
That's my go-to whenever I'm writing with ChatG I'm like, "That's too cliche. That's not me. It's too cliche."
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it's like,
It's
"Okay,
like, "Ashley, have
Ashley."
you heard yourself?" Yeah.
It's like that. It's like, it's like, "Let me try this in a less cliche way." And then I'm just like, "Okay, that's not it
Yeah.
either." But I think maybe what does it look like for like, "Hey, what are some ways that I can like, maybe a framework that I can use to help me write?" Then you're actually learning to become more of a writer in yourself and developing the skill and less on the, "No, you're not getting it right," kinda thing, right?
How dare you use AI to make yourself better and not just do the work for you? How dare you? You expect me to grow as an individual? What? I just want someone else to do the work for me.
Oh, that is hilarious. That's so great. I feel
I
like that's the wrap right there.
yeah.
It's the thing, right? Um